Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love what you see here today, everything is for sale. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of any of these watches, which are in stock and ready to roll. We buy what we sell what we buy. I know I need a new piece of paper, that's coming, but sell us a watch or an entire collection. No upper limit on value paid. We pay cash, we pay fast, we wire direct, and we walk you through each step of the process. If you wish to trade a watch you're not wearing for one that you will, or even trade several watches into one, we can do that as well. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. So today we start with a 2023 update of a model originally launched as a Platinum Limited Edition back in 2017. This is the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra World Timer. So what's different? A lot. It's all titanium now, with a full matte satin finish, subdued, equipped now with a black ceramic bezel. We have a dial that is also made of titanium, laser bladed to feature a projection of the land masses as viewed from the North Pole. We have the reference cities of the world, with Paris replaced by Omega's home city of Bienne. This is all under 15 millimeters thick. It's about 14.4 millimeters thick and 43 millimeters in diameter. You can see how the strap's been integrated by a little bit of an intermediate link. That is a removable piece of the case. You can put this on any strap that fits. 150 meters water resistant, highly shock resistant, basically amagnetic, and resistant to magnetism to extremes. You can see how I can set my local hour hand, but then if I wish to, I can also set everything in sync. So I read my hour adjacent to my city of interest. So for example, I can see that it is 2 in the afternoon in Bangkok. I can see that it is 4 in the morning in Rio. I can see that it is 4 in the afternoon in Tokyo, and then I read my minutes at center. That's how that works. Flip it all over, twin barrel, automatic winding, 60-hour power reserve, master chronometer, coaxial, caliber 8938, and all of this matched with an Omega deploying clasp. Now this is a really nice subdued look, and just as it is water resistant, it is also highly luminescent. So while it's often described as the surf and turf Seamaster, it's not a professional diver. It is still a very serious sports watch, and you'll appreciate that on the wrist, it's a whole lot more wearable than the bracelet version in steel, and also a whole lot more wearable than the massive version in platinum. It's a great fit. I love the way it looks, and it's got a super romantic portrayal of the world with the laser ablation of the land masses in titanium and the rest in media blast. A really great look. Okay, personal favorite of mine, and one I used to own. Actually, it was my Grail watch for 4 years, as I planned to purchase it with savings, then wore it for 4 years, and I was never disappointed. So for 8 years, the Jaeger-LeCoultre Duometre, a Chronograph, was a big part of my life. The Chronographe model is a 42 millimeter Foudroyant chronograph that does something very interesting. It has a dual wing movement, 2 movements in one case. Now, I owned the white gold model. This one in rose gold came out in 2007, 13.9 millimeters thick, 49.9 lug to lug, 42 in diameter. The dial has a wonderful granular tone. We have center chronograph seconds in blue, center time of day running seconds. In blue, Foudroyant, 1/6 of a second, 2 separate power reserve indicators that you actually wind by turning the crown in different directions. So we've got chronograph 1/6 of seconds, a 60-minute chronograph counter, that's for tens of minutes. You can see there's a scrolling display for single-digit chrono minutes, and then chrono hours is coaxial on an inner 12-hour scale. The other side is all time. Telling the time is very important. Now, all of this does come with stop seconds. Look at the thought and attention they put into the crown. Double row knurling and media blast with polish. The case features exquisite welded lugs and double finishing, with the case satinated and the lug face is polished. Turn it all over, the dual wing movement is really something else. Now you can see one barrel winds while the other ratchets. One barrel handles the hours and the minutes. Basically, it runs the oscillator. The other handles the chronograph. So this watch can do what no other chronograph can. When you activate the chrono, you don't lose any power reserve and you don't lose any balance amplitude, because that's when you activate the chrono, you're doubling the power demand, but but you're also doubling the power supply by bringing that second 50-hour barrel online. So they're both 50 hours. The bridges and plates made of German silver or Maischolt. You can see it is a column wheel chrono. It uses an interesting type of clutch. It's not a vertical clutch, it's not a lateral clutch, because you have a chronograph drivetrain that is constantly in tension and engaged. There's a little finger that effectively blocks it. It stays in tension, so all that happens when you activate the chronograph is that it releases. You want to stop it and then hold to reset. When you activate the chronograph, note there's no jump. It's just like a vertical clutch. It releases the finger that holds the chronograph drivetrain in place. So there's no slack to be taken up since the whole thing is already in tension from the barrel that drives the chrono. So when you start it up, it starts without any jump, it loses no amplitude, and it loses no power reserve. It's free sprung with a 3 Hz beat rate. You can see the finishing is eye-popping. This is one of the best looking JLC movements of all time. It is extraordinarily accurate, as I found mine would run to less than a second gain a day, even with the chronograph act. You can see Côte de Soleil or Sunburst, Côte de Genève radiating out across the bridges, and both blued and polished screws employed. Back when this came out, the Duometres all still had full folding clasps. Later, in an act of cost cutting, JLC would fit a lot of them with pin buckles. This is the way it should be. Full clasp, full gold, weighs a ton, super rare. JLC only made a few hundred Duometre per year, even as it was making tens of thousands of watches at a time. So this was a rare piece and a flagship model, possibly the most interesting and innovative chronograph of the 2000s. It is 2 movements with a single oscillator in one case. All right, so here's something that I find eye-popping. 2 Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar chronographs from different eras of the 5270 Perpetual Calendar chronograph. So let's get a little bit closer here. The original came out in 2011 as a white gold watch. It had no tachymeter. It was also considered to be a little bit sterile. So for 2013, Patek introduced a new tachymeter model with a silver white dial. In 2014, a blue version of that. Unfortunately, not everyone liked the implementation of the tachymeter. Some people called this a chin, where the radial date interacts with the seconds track and the tachymeter, and some loved it, some hated it, but it was a source of controversy. So the watch went from being anodyne in its initial form to a bit of a lightning rod. Now, both of these watches feature the same movement. Both of these watches feature perpetual calendar chronographs. Both of these watches are 41 millimeters in diameter. Now, the one you see right here is white gold, and then the one off to the right here, this is a 2022 model. This is platinum. You can really see the difference in tone between white gold and platinum. Platinum is clearly a lot whiter once you put them next to each other. So let's talk about some of the differences here, because it's really important to chart the changes. The initial platinum version of the 5270p was the salmon model. That preserved leaf-style hands, the tachymeter, and used a combination of indices and Arabic numerals. This is very different from that, and if you want to see the difference, we'll just bring both the watches on now that we're at super close range. You could see this one has leaf hands, a tachymeter, and this sort of waxing and waning scale of dates down here. You can see the numerals shrink and enlarge as they wind their way around the contours of other features of the dial. You can also see that the sub-register hands here are all polished. Now move over to this one, and you can see we now have a green gradient dial, but we've also done away with the tachymeter track outboard. We now have Dauphine-style hands. Instead of baton indices here, we have dart-style indices with pointed inward tips. You can see the hands and the indices are both different, and that the sub-register hands here are actually varnished white to make for better contrast than you have right here. Another feature that I like, albeit one that you could always change if you wished, from the factory, it comes with a green contrast stitched strap, and you know it's a platinum Patek of modern construction because of the top Vesselton diamond between the lugs. On the back, we have caliber 29535 PSQ Petit Second et Quantième, so a small seconds with perpetual calendar, column wheel, black polished and capped, with a lateral clutch, 65-hour power reserve, accurate to no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day, overcoil hand-shaped hairspring, stop seconds or hacking. It does have hacking. See it right there. The overcoil hairspring and the lateral clutch make this a higher grade Patek Philippe chronograph, as only the more advanced Patek chronograph watchmakers are certified to work on lateral clutches and overcoils. When it's vertical clutches and silicon, simple, goes together like Legos. This requires finesse. You can see there's a little pawl and pawl wheel for the instantaneous minute jumper, and you can also appreciate just how fine is the action of the lateral clutch. The capped column wheel is a Geneva and Patek Philippe tradition, and you can see that the finishing as well as the architecture world class. It should force you to reconsider the commonplace that Lange owns the grandeur and the glamour in chronograph architecture and finishing these days. This wants for nothing. It is a very special watch. I'm going to show you both the white gold and the platinum on my wrist because I know everyone's got different tastes. You might prefer a blue dial. You might prefer a tachometer. Here we go. This would be my choice. Platinum with a green dial. A really great looking watch, and in my opinion, the definitive 5270. Now we're going to go back to the white gold and take a look at this because this has got a character all of its own. It is lighter. I can feel it's lighter after holding the platinum, but on the wrist, it's still gratifyingly weighty. And neither one of these watches is too thick. They're identical with sloped concave bezel profiles. Really great looking. Perpetual calendars, a lot of fun to own, able to deal with irregular length months and leap years without any interventions. Okay, speaking of perpetual calendars, I've got a rather special set of them. The new and the old IWC. This came out in 2021, and it was a limited edition of 250 pieces. The IWC Big Pilot's Watch Perpetual Calendar Racing Green. So we have a 46.5 millimeter black ceramic case, extremely scratch resistant, screw down crown, 60 meters water resistant. You can surface swim it. We have the IWC Kurt Klaus Perpetual Calendar System, which is adjusted using the crown, and everything from the moon phase to the date adjusts in sync. It'll even adjust the year and the decade. So all you need to do is set the correct date, assuming the watch isn't too far off. It'll be as simple as setting a Datejust. Now, we also have a hacking or stop seconds function. And then we have quite a bit going on the dial. We have, let's say these are a little A4 attack aircraft there, northern and southern hemisphere moon phases. We got a coaxial date indicator with a power reserve indicator, and the power reserve on this watch is 7 days. Running seconds and the day over at 9 o'clock, the month at 6, and then we've got that year, decade, century, and millennium, which, by the way, can be swapped out by your watchmaker if you get to the third and fourth digits there. Now, turning it all over, by the way, I love the combination of racing metallic green with rose gold accents. We have manufacturer caliber 52615, so it's big. It's about 38 millimeters in diameter, automatic winding. It's got a fully ceramic IWC Peloton pawl-based winding system. You can see both the pawls and the wheel now ceramic for utmost durability and efficiency, and it doesn't create the former problem of dirt on the movement that earlier versions of the Peloton created. We still have a free-sprung balance adjusted in 5 positions with an overcoil hairspring, but on this 52,000 series movement, this is now a 4 hertz beat rate. Another big change on the 52,000 series, which debuted on the Portuguesers in 2015, twin mainspring barrels. So the idea there being that you no longer have the tendency for the watch to gain a ton of time when fully wound or start losing fistfuls of time as it gets down to its last day or two. The twin barrels with phased mainsprings in series fixes that problem. The watch, of course, inspired by the Luftwaffe's BR of 1940. IWC was one of the manufacturers of that watch with the IWC Type 52 TSC movement. This is odd in that it's the tradition of a Luftwaffe watch, but it's also British racing green. So there's some conflicts here. That said, there is no conflict about the way it fits. This thing looks the business, but you need the wrist for it. I would recommend a wrist of at least 18 centimeters circumference to wear this, because though it is smaller than the 55 millimeter Luftwaffe watch, 46.5 and 59 millimeters lug to lug means big wrists only. It's like being a certain height to ride at the carnival. You must have a wrist sufficient to bear this monstrosity. This is a watch that's like the Infinity Gauntlet. You need to have might and nobility to graft it onto your person and wield it in all of its power. It's a lot. But if you are a more gentle traditionalist, or like me, you've got a small wrist, or you're not a titan like Thanos, or you're John Mayer and you just hate modern IWC, this might be more for you. Launched in 1987 and made sparsely until 2001, this is the IWC NovichChanto Perpetual Calendar, meaning 900, or in a watchmaking context, referring to the 1900s. This is a watch that uses the IWC Kurt Klaus Perpetual Calendar, reference 354607. This is the second generation NovichChanto. This is the watch that uses the JLC base. So the original version, launched in 87 and made through 95, used a Breguet automatic base. This uses a JLC 960 automatic base. So basically a small rotor automatic designed for automatic reversos and ladies' watches. And it's attached to the Kurt Klaus Perpetual Calendar system, which you just saw, albeit this is a much earlier version of the system. So the crown is a screw down, so you don't accidentally adjust the calendar, but it works the exact same way. You turn, and everything moves in sync using the quick set. It's that simple. Even the moon phase is mechanically programmed. You never need to look anything up. You can also see that it's got a fascinating case. It is very compact across the wrist. It's about the size of a reverso grand tie. If you've ever experienced a reverso grand tie, you know exactly like the NovichChanto is going to wear. So the NovichChanto has a 26 millimeter width, 42 millimeters lug to lug, and it's under 10 millimeters thick. It's got this lovely onion style crown. It's got a very vintage vibe. I love the fluting down the shoulders of the case, and you'll notice it's a monoblock case. Everything loads through the back, so it's got the seamless look between case and bezel. A really special watch that I enjoy immensely, but it is not immense. On the wrist, wow, what a pleasure. You can see the lugs well inboard the edges, and down the barrel you can see the extraordinary amount of clearance I've got. Form watches often wear big, but I can tell you, you could wear this watch on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. A borderline vintage watch. It wears on him and it wears on her. Okay, this, I don't know if I can call this a grail watch, because some people say a grail is something you can't achieve under any circumstances. With some prioritization, savings, and a few years of planning, I could conceivably own this dream watch, the Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar Retrograde. This is the 5496P014. It came out of Basel World in 2014, and it fixed the main problem of the 2011 original, which was that it was basically a silver dial in a platinum case. It looked very austere. This fixes the problem. Patek calls this honey brown, and I never really thought of honey as brown, but by any name, it's beautiful. It's got a metallic sunburst. It has polished dimples for the odd dates, as well as for the minutes and the seconds outboard. It's an uncommon center rotor automatic center second Patek Philippe Perpetual Calendar, and it hails from the line of 1992's model 5050. That's where you get this retrograde sort of tri-aperture with moon phase display. Now what's fascinating is Patek still gives you solid case backs with these perpetual calendars, as well as the sapphire case back, so you can have whichever one you like. But they give you both because some people prefer the added weight and the integrity of a platinum case back, considering that a sapphire weighs a few dozen, not even a few dozen grams, maybe 5 or 6 grams. This is like wearing a giant dollar, maybe a gold dollar, or even a platinum coin on your wrist. It's also, because it's more inherently valuable, a sign that Patek's not trying to short you the precious metal by charging a full precious metal case price and then giving you a sapphire, which might cost all of $30. Now, being a 39.5 millimeter watch that's fairly thin, it wears easily. Again, don't worry about the case back. We have the display case back with the watch. We can fit it if you want it. But for me, this is the definitive 5496 and one of my absolute favorite Patek Philippe watches. Of all the watches I'm showing you today, this would be my choice. Out of this show, everything you've seen, including the Duometre, which I actually bought, if I'd known this existed, I might have had different thoughts. Spectacular platinum Patek Philippe retrograde date perpetual calendar. That said, I love things that are exquisitely handcrafted and historically important. And believe it or not, if you want a Daniel Roth watch today, never mind the new subscription tourbillon. He has almost nothing to do with that. but he led watchmaking and design at Breguet from 1976 until about 1987. And in 1983, he launched the 3130, one of the two critical pieces in the early days under the Chaumet brothers, when Daniel Roth, or as they call him in proper French, Daniel Roth, was creating the look of modern-day Breguet. What should a modern Breguet wristwatch in the tradition of a pocket watch look like? Well, guess what? Daniel Roth had his ideas. Let's have a coined case, Pastille lugs. Let's have flanged case back and domed bezel defining the mid-case profile. Let's have a cabochon on the crown, and let's have dials based on Breguet's greatest models. So this dial is based on the Breguet pocket watch number 5 with one major change in that the running seconds of that has been replaced with the radial date of this. But the dial is made of solid gold, cut on straight line machines and Rose engines to produce several different cut patterns. This is a 18-karat gold dial, hand cut by a guillocher using a Rose lathe that he guides by hand, and then silvered to create the look you see here. The hands are fired blue steel. We have a power reserve indicator, a radial date, and a moon phase. And as you can see, beautiful complexity on the dial side, but there's also a handmade case. The coining is laid down by cold rolling and then hand finishing in a jig. The lugs are welded on with all evidence of the gathered metal from the weld removed by hand to create a super sharp break between case and lug. And then the straps held on using screws and bars with a real sapphire cabochon, not the spindle you find on Hublot or Cartier. The back is where things get crazy. Now, while this is based on the 3130, this model with the engraved movement is called the 3137. So this is what Breguet calls the 502 movement. It's based on the Frédéric Piguet P71 3/4 rotor, so automatic winding with unidirectional winding action. It's got a free sprung balance conversion. It has a 45-hour power reserve, a 3 hertz beat rate, and it pivots on 37 joules. You can see flourishes like this flower on the barrel bridge, and then the open barrel that helps to make this base movement as thin as it is. You could see Breguet, as well as the jewel count, engraved by hand with a spectacular banknote scrolling or fleurissant. You can also see that there's mirror beveling on the edge of every one of these bridges, as well as the interior surfaces of the skeletonized rotor. So we don't just have engraving, we have anglage, black polishing of the screws, engine turning or perlage of the base plate. And if you get really close to the wheels of both the winding system and the drivetrain, you can see that they have been interior beveled, which is an extraordinary thing, as the spokes themselves and the inner circumference of the wheels, those are beveled by hand in those tiny recesses. This is a work of art, no two exactly alike. And again, after 1995, the so-called Daniel Roth watches were nothing more than inspired by his prior work. Today, they're being built by Louis Vuitton. If you want a real Daniel Roth watch, you buy something built between 1988 and 1994, or you buy one of the Breguets from the era when he was running the ship, when he called the shots in the factory at Le Sentier, and the watches were a flowering of his genius and imagination, not of Breguet, but of Daniel Roth, one of the modern masters, and this is one of the most affordable ways to get into high-end independent horology if you know your stuff. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.